While the world was telling us who we needed to be, we daydreamed those hindrances away. You imagined a life and a world without any restraints. Middle school, high school, you take pictures with your friends, sometimes on your phones, but that time by yourself and you were like, I'm gonna be on America's Next Top Model and I'm 10. You know what I mean? But I would sit there and I would kiss pieces of paper to see if I could get the perfect kiss. Or hoping that like my animal would speak human to me. Like I cannot be the only one.
Where did she go? Is she hiding in me? Behind dreams I used to dream. Help me see the world the way I used to do. Life was just good.
Welcome back to Her Girlhood, a place where we find pleasure and all things girlhood, where we talk niche, broad, and everything growing up as a girl in the early 2000s, and a lot of this applies to other generations, the older generations, the newer generations. This is a place for the girls. Okay, today I am so excited about this episode idea. By the way, this is the mic for this week. I have been trying to find some niche little mics. Today, we are talking about our alone time as girls, the secret life of girls when nobody is watching. Girls, we reached the ultimate flow state when we were alone in our bedrooms. Our bedrooms became many new things, a whole universe, and a playground where we could find self-discovery all by ourselves. I believe that these moments by ourselves built us into being the women that we are today. When I think about girlhood, this is what I think about. I think about the times when we're alone, not necessarily the times when we're with our friends or our sisters, as much as that was amazing and part of the journey. The time spent alone in our bedrooms were the most pivotal times, I think, about growing up in girlhood. We were secretly staying up well past our bedtimes, and many of us were getting into some wacky things when we were alone, and this applies to girls, like young girls. We didn't have phones to distract us. Most of us didn't have TVs in our rooms. It was just us and our insane imaginations with absolutely nothing around us to distract us other than maybe our rooms and the things in our rooms, which we're going to get into because we're going to deep dive in our alone time today. Identity labs, what I call this part of childhood. This is the part of childhood where you are alone with nothing but yourself and your thoughts. You might have your sibling in the room, but for whatever reason, and maybe this was just my experience with my sister, these specific moments when you were alone were very, very like your sibling was doing their own thing and you were doing your own thing and you were coexisting, if you will, doing your own thing if you did share a room. And in my case, my younger sister tended to do other things. She was with my parents, my dad, so I was left to my own devices a lot of the time, and there were points in my childhood where I did have my own bedroom. And let me tell you, no matter what, I found time to have complete and utter time to myself. What were we doing with this identity building time? Because I want to kind of break this up into segments on this Girlhood podcast and take you guys on a journey as to what were we doing? Because some of this stuff you might have forgotten about, and some of this stuff you might have been thinking about, but have never heard anyone talk about it. And that is why, again, I say this every episode, every podcast episode I make, I don't hear a lot of conversations happening about girlhood. And girlhood doesn't just look like being a 6-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 13-year-old girl. Girlhood looks like being 27 years old and writing a podcast episode about girlhood all by yourself, using a highlighter, using a crappy notebook. This is peak girlhood. And I do feel like a lot of us women are missing this because we have these, and these distract us a lot. Journaling was the most, I don't know if this is just specific to some girls, because I know that some women didn't grow up doing a lot of journaling, and that's totally fine. But I do feel like a lot of us were, and I think this spreads throughout generations. I don't know if the modern day kids nowadays, oh my God, I sound old. I don't know if the modern day kids are doing it the way that I fear many of us older generations were doing it. If you were a parent to a Gen Alpha and have like a teenager or a preteen or even a young girl, are they journaling? Are we giving them the space and the notebooks to journal? Is that just an universal girlhood thing, or is that specific to pre-internet era girlhood? I need to know. And I'm not judging the young girls of today. They're doing with what they have. However, your journals and your notebooks were the safest things. The safest things. And I feel that because it was a time where you could write down the most unhinged things that were in your mind, okay? I wrote lists of my friends. I wrote lists of the boys that I found to be the most attractive and the least attractive. I wrote lists of my favorite songs. I wrote songs. We did a lot of things with our journals and our diaries and our sketch pads. Like, this was a time of peak self-reflection. I fear I self-reflected more as an 8-year-old girl than I did as an adult until I got divorced and was forced to be alone in my room, as I am right now, and truly think and feel my feelings without another person interrupting them. And it's no shame to him, it's no shame to husbands or boyfriends, but women being able to be their own in their own energy at night, I feel like is peak feminine energy. Peak flow state feminine energy is to be alone in your room with everything under the sun when it comes to hobbies and your own space. This was a time when we were figuring out who we were, and our journals and our sketch pads and our diaries were precisely how we were doing it. A lot of us girls were reading diary-based books. There was a book, I think her name is like Amelia, something Amelia. I'll have to look up what she's specifically called. I'll put it here. When I read these like journal kind of graphic novels, if you will. This was pre-Diary of a Wimpy Kid, by the way. When I read these journals and her drawings and her unhinged just deep dive, I was so inspired to do that myself. Even when I did read Greg Heffley journals and dork diaries, which was slightly over me when I was I was at the age for dork diaries, but it was kind of at my older childhood era. I think they were producing more books when I was like preteen and teenage years, but I remember when that came out and I was so inspired by it. But this specific book, she doodled in it, there were colors, she put stickers all over her journal, and I remember, and I know this was an author, an adult female author, but it was so inspiring to me as a kid, and I hope this isn't a weird place to pull from. But even Anne Frank, when you're a little girl and you read how Anne Frank journaled and how she wrote in her diary and how it was published, as a little girl, she was kind of my hero. I don't know if that is a niche thing or an inappropriate thing to say, and I think her being a hero is not inappropriate, but the fact that as a little girl, I was like, wait, maybe I should write in my journal, and if there is a war in the United States of America in 2007, maybe my journal will also be published if I die. Like, that was what was going through our minds, and I need to know if that's niche. Please comment down below. I know on Spotify you can comment, and I've seen a lot of you girls comment, and I love it, so please keep them coming. I want to know all of your unhinged thoughts. This is a community. We're all talking here, not just me. As much as I have a really weirdly good memory of like the past, I don't want to be the only one talking here. I want to have other women sit next to me, celebrities, maybe I can get that to happen, social media influencers or content creators, or my friends and my girlies and my sisters. Like, I want to get these girlies here and we're going to talk, we're going to yap, okay? So comment down below. How did you feel about having a diary as a kid? I want to know. Who were your people? Who were you looking to? I think what was so special is that this was just like our inner monologue. We could say the most unhinged things. I feel like my specific middle school journal, if I read that out loud, I would be so embarrassed. Like, there are some things in there where I'm like, oh my God, girl, holy cow, you need to calm down. But that was a place where we could be crazy and unhinged, was in our journals. That time by yourself, or maybe you have some music, maybe you're not allowed to have music because it's bedtime, maybe you're secretly staying up late to write in these journals or doodle or draw. This was our time. This was our time to be in our true feminine energy. While the world was telling us who we needed to be, we daydreamed those hindrances away. Okay? Daydreaming all alone in your room was peak, like just pure, dare I say, magical? I manifested pre-manifestation when I would daydream. alone in my room. And quite frankly, this was when you didn't have the restraints of the modern day hindrances that women face. But I want to be careful when I get too far into it because I know that I tend to go deeper than some may enjoy. And you know what, that might be because a lot of men told me that I talk too much. A lot of men told me that I was too much or that my dreams were crazy. And as girls, we feel that. Not just me, many of us, most of us. We are not allowed to be too feminine. We are not allowed to be too girly. We're not allowed to be too sporty. We are not allowed to be too muscular or too skinny or too big or too small. We are not allowed to listen to Taylor Swift. We are not allowed to listen to rock. No matter what, we are met with something telling us we can't do it. If we're a little whimsical, we're manic pixie dream girls. If we're loud and proud and out there, we're called crazy and bitchy. No matter what we do, we are met with something. We are met with some kind of messaging that says, no, you're not allowed to do these things. You're not allowed to express yourself. You're not allowed to live. You have to live between the boxes of what we've created you in, which is maybe have a career, but not too far, not too fast. And when you do have a career, you need to balance it with having children because damn it, you can't not have kids. And if you do decide that you don't want to have a husband or a partner or a wife, you are met with something else. You are met with questions and curiosities and why and oh my God, and where's your husband? When are you going to start dating? You're not allowed to be a woman. You're not allowed to express yourself to the fullest capacity ever because it is met with some kind of barrier. So when you sat down and you laid down or you just were glazed over, you imagined a life and a world without any restraints. Whether this was Fantasyland with dragons and unicorns and magic, or this was rooted in reality where you were a bad bitch celebrity as a 9-year-old and you were a jewelry maker or a fashion artist. Because let's be real, all of us wanted to be on Disney Channel. I think at some point, even though now looking back, I think we're all glad we weren't on Disney Channel because many of the women and men speak about how it just was not good for children to be on it, which that is a whole other episode that I want to talk to. And honestly, with that type of episode, I would love to have some Disney Channel stars chime in. But that's the crazy thing is that's where you get unhinged. Alone in your bedroom, you don't have restraints. It's just you, your toy horse, your stuffed animals, and the personified personalities that you put them all on. Because let's be real, girls love that, okay? That was peak, unhindered, no restraints. Your imagination could fly. And I feel like that built us into the women we are. And that allowed us to be in our true creative feminine energy, even as little girls. And I have recently been forcing myself. I know I'm going to sound insane. I'm going to sound like I have all kinds of issues. Again, see, that's that little voice in the back of my head that knows that society is going to have something to say about me being a person and a human and a woman. But lately, I have forced myself, with and without music, to daydream. To imagine exactly what I want my life to look like, to daydream about a crush, to daydream about my career, to daydream about this podcast or the house I'm gonna build for my daughter. To daydream is to be in your feminine energy, and I think so many women would be benefiting from that time to themselves. Even if you have your silly little husband next to you, close your eyes and daydream. I love turning on some music and playing music that is fitting the vibe. And I will just daydream about the things I want to accomplish in my life. And it has helped my mental health so much to think beyond the constraints of what I'm faced with in my reality, because your thoughts are power and your thoughts carry so much weight. And so when you can visualize yourself doing things that aren't what you're doing right now, it puts you in the place where you can effing do that stuff. It puts you in the mindset where you can be like, I'm going to start a Girlhood podcast where I have weird mic stands and talk about femininity and growing up in girlhood. That time to yourself to daydream and think unhinged thoughts. I highly recommend doing it. Highly recommend doing it. I also remember emotionally rehearsing conversations, and I don't know if this is a little bit of autism. I do have ADHD. I have never been diagnosed with autism, but I do see that there are some similarities to the way my brain thinks and some of the symptoms symptoms I see people talk about when it comes to autism. However, that's another story. I still do, but mostly when I was a kid, I would think of conversations that I wanted to have with people and I would rehearse them, sometimes out loud. Again, it was this true creative feminine power where we're sitting in our thoughts and we're letting us truly play with our emotions. And I think if more women allowed themselves to do that, we would be so much more fulfilled and happy. We would feel so much less restrained by our current reality and so much more inspired to do stuff outside of the box. Our time with music was so beautiful. It's actually why in my daydreaming segment, I did discuss putting on music, even as an adult, to daydream to, because when I was little, I would sit back, I'd play some Tori Amos, or I would play Fiona Apple, I would play Disney remake versions of the Disney songs, or Hilary Duff, or the High School Musical theme songs, and I would sit down and I would imagine. And you know what else I know you did too? You created a music video. You were the singer. You were the star of the music video. And holy cow, did you fantasize? I cannot be the only one. Like, I guarantee that I'm not the only one. In fact, please let me know if I'm the only one. What were your songs that you would daydream to? How often were you doing this? I remember laying vertically on my bed and just letting the music fill me and letting the lyrics just, like, even if it was the most breakup emo song, like Since You've Been Gone with Kelly Clarkson, I would lay back and I would imagine that I had the worst boyfriend in the world and I'm 9, right? And I'm currently getting my revenge. We're getting revenge right now as 9-year-old girls in our imaginations. This is alone time as a girl. And again, do guys do this? I'm not speaking for the trees here because I'm not a guy, but do guys do this? I need to know. If you're a guy watching this, which I highly doubt, there's no way that a straight man is watching this. Some of my LGBTQ community men might be watching this, but if you're a straight man, there's no way you're doing this. There's no way. I know that my ex-husband mentioned that he would think of fight scenes when he would listen to music. You know what I'm saying? So it's very different than what we're thinking of. Maybe some girls are thinking of fight scenes. I know I certainly was thinking of like having magical powers. Obviously, with my wand, I was Alex Russoing up in that shit right now. You know what I mean? Like, I had my wand or my little fingers with my little magic. Like, that's what we were doing. We weren't fight scening that shit. You know what I mean? Let's talk about creativity as young women in our girlhood, because this was amazing. The time that you have alone before bed, or even just throughout the day, because this wasn't always specific to bedtime. This might be a little niche, but I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a backstory. My dad had a rule where before bed we had 30 minutes because we had 8 o'clock bedtime and then 8:30 was when lights were off. And I remember my dad was very keen on every single day we needed to have 30 minutes to read or write in our journals. And so that is kind of why I had a lot of this time every night, like designated time to do this. And a lot of the time I wouldn't read. A lot of the time I wouldn't even write in my journal. I would be doing some unhinged things. I would be drawing. He wasn't always huge on the drawing. He really wanted us to like read and write, especially because in the early 2000s, I don't know if this was just my dad or my school, but we had to have like time every day where we were reading, or we had to log our books, or they had books that they sent us. But my dad was very big on us sitting down and reading. And as a kid, we were so anti this time, even though we low-key liked it, but I remember wanting more flexibility. And honestly, with the restraints, I did a lot with it. But there were times where by yourself at night during the day, whenever it was, and times when my dad was like, F it, like you can do whatever you want as long as you're in your bed doing something constructive and creative and just with yourself and not down here being annoying. He had this rule, and honestly, my daughter is gonna have this too. I'm gonna give her a little bit more options, but she's gonna have a basket of things that she can pick from, whether it's a book or a journal or a puzzle or a sketch pad, anything. She can sit down, and this is her time before bed without a screen, without a phone, without me, where she's kind of encouraged to be by herself. And I think that's why this alone time episode is so special to me, because he just wanted us to be in our beds doing something different, doing something less noisy and overstimulating, truly. And I respect him for that now as a parent, because again, I want to do that for my daughter. I want to kind of force her. She's going to hate me, and then she's going to come back and have her own podcast one day, or write, or talk to her friends one day and be like, Like, I'm so glad my mom gave me this time every night. However, again, back to this. Being creative alone as a little girl was so much fun. It was so playful. I was, and I kind of still am, obsessed with comics. I'm telling you, and this is niche, okay? This is not everyone. I'm not saying that this is like, it makes me cool or anything. This is not really that cool. This is kind of dorky. So if you don't want to hear this, you can skip a little bit. If you want to, go off. This is a little weird for you. Because I loved to draw. And I wasn't a terrible drawer as a kid. In fact, I'm going to have an episode all about art class and childhood art class and then high school and middle school art class and just doing art in general. Like, I'm going to have a whole episode on that soon. But art was already something I loved. And so as a little girl, I would sit down with a ruler and I'd create little boxes, because I think that's when graphic novels were really becoming a thing. And I know that there are going to be moms from the 80s and some people from all different walks of life who had comics as a kid, because I do think comic strips were huge in the 80s, 90s, 70s, 60s. That was huge, right? But I sat down and I would draw comics like nobody's business. And it was so fun. And I would do these comic strips. And this is another niche thing that I would do. Me and my cousin, Bernadette, you might be watching this, my best friend growing up, we would send snail mail, weekly snail mail to each other. And I would include these comics. I would sometimes print them off because I was a little protective. I would want my comics to myself too. I'd print a copy to send to her, or I'd keep the copy myself, depending on my mood. Sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes she has the originals, you know what I mean? But I would send these comics with her. And so she would read my like super girly sticker filled letter. She'd read my comic. She'd read my like Jonas Brother, this or that little questionnaire that I would do, or whatever it was that we were into at the time. And it was so fun. The time that we spent alone in our rooms. I want to know, what creative thing did you do growing up? What was the creative endeavor that you had? Because I know many of us, it wasn't comics. I know for many of us, it was drawing, or it was writing, or you were like sitting down. I know I did this too. I would sit down, I'd get my journal or my composition notebook, and I would write whole movies or entire books and novels, or I would start them and we wouldn't finish them. And I remember thinking, I'm going to be the kid that gets to be a published author. Never happened, but it was so fun. Because of that delusion though, we would do it. We would have so much fun doing so too. What else would I do? We would take pictures alone. I didn't have a camera, like a camera, like a classic take pictures camera, but I know that this was a huge early 2000s thing. And I do think some of the older generations did have access to cameras like this. I don't know about digital cameras, obviously not digital cameras until a little bit later, but taking pictures and cutesy little pictures by yourself, that time by yourself, you were like, I'm gonna be on America's Next Top Model and I'm 10. You know what I mean? Or you would take pictures of your dolls. I make that face because I know that that's a common experience, right? I had a video camera, and alone, not necessarily during the evening, but alone during the day, I remember creating an entire movie using Piggly Wiggly aliens that I got from their little token dispensers. I composed a song. I have to put this on the internet because sometimes this stuff does really well on the internet because this is such a like kid thing. And then I had like a piece of paper, like my camera would like show the paper and I would swipe it away and I put my camera on the ground as like a black screen. And then I composed my song over here with my stupid piano. Oh my God. What I would do to have that level of unhinged creativity now. Which, you know what? I'm alone right now and I'm filming a podcast for a few people to watch. And again, I'm not doing this with a man next to me. In fact, I don't think women can do this with men next to them. It's not because men suck. It's not because we hate men. It's because to be in our feminine energy is to be in our feminine energy without any blockages. And I think only women can really truly do this when they are alone by themselves, or maybe with their sibling or their best friend. What else would I do? Ooh, yeah, we were filming movies. I would compose it, and I remember showing my mom and she had to sit and watch that shit. Oh my God. And that was like a 30-minute thing, right? Because do you remember when you were a kid and you would be like, I'm going to make a movie, and then you'd realize like how short the movie actually was? And you were like, I don't know if that's really a movie. That's kind of like a short film. Or some of you were making long movies. I know my Aunt Helen, she had a camera in the 80s and she would sit down and write movies and then have her siblings act in them and herself, obviously. Like, this is peak girlhood. What else were we doing? We were doing our makeup. Some of us were stealing our makeup from our mothers, sitting in the bathroom. And do you remember when you would do this and you would attempt to put on makeup like an adult, and then you would kind of be embarrassed because it would look awful? So you would have to like hide it away so that no one saw you. And then sometimes people did see you and then you felt really embarrassed. And it's always your dad. Like, your dad is always walking in and he's like, what are you doing? And I remember like that was a very big thing where I would steal my mom's makeup. And let's go a little niche here. Young girlhood makeup, like from Claire's and Libby Lou, remember those? Was never very pigmented or very good, to be honest. So going to your mom's really good Mary Kay was way better than your Claire's no pigment at all makeup. I remember being a little disappointed because you would get like little lipstick palettes and they'd have like cutesy little covers on them, and then they'd have like orange, blue, purple, red, and you'd put that on your lips and you would have like no color. And I remember being like offended, like, what do you mean? I'm 9 years old. I'm ready for real lipstick by myself that I'll wipe off in 2 minutes. And then I remember taking those lipstick lips, and this might be a little niche here, but I would sit there and I would kiss pieces of paper to see if I could get the perfect kiss. Please tell me that I'm not the only one, because that's super embarrassing, but I can't be, because lipsticks, this is getting kind of weird here, okay? The lipstick or like the lip print was kind of an early 2000s trend or motif. I don't know if that was just because my mom was in an MLM Mary Kay company, which she was weirdly good at, but then found out that it was an MLM, but she was in it for like years. So I had a lot of makeup and inspiration and girly women around me who like wore stunning makeup and were out here looking like Sex in the City and in their like suits, right? And their big hair. I wanted to be a woman so bad. And so I would pretend to be by putting on my makeup. And then the one that I think is very universal, and I think boys would do this too, or kids, young kids would do this too, was signing your fake autograph for when you were on Disney Channel or when you were a movie star or famous for singing. I had full spreads where I would do this, and I was so mad, and I still am, honestly, to this day, because my signature is so bad, and I would try to make mine like look casually messy, and it was never casually messy. It was just messy and looked bad. Or it was took me too long, and I remember being like, if I'm signing a bunch of posters, this can't take me this long, or I'm not going to be able to give my fans what they want, which is my autograph. All right. The next segment of this podcast episode is objects that held our spaces. Okay? These things held space for us. The first one for me, and we're gonna go on an episode just on like emotional support objects as girls, but the first one was a green blanket. And quite honestly, it looked very similar to the Charlie Brown blanket that I think his name is like Lionel or Linus. I think it's Linus. And he has like that bluish blanket. Funnily enough, even before I saw that show as a kid, my emotional support blanket was that blanket, and she was with me everywhere. I also had a zebra print blanket that was also with me everywhere. I loved these blankets. They were everything to me. We also had our magazines and our books. I was really into reading rewritten classics because my dad was a writer and still is a writer, so he was very big on, you need to read Anne of the Green Gable, or what was the other one? I loved the Swiss Family Robinson. Super random, but I would read these rewritten classics of these books because I had a hard time reading, and I was ADHD. So quite frankly, those books were a bit challenging for me at times. I loved these rewritten books because it allowed me to read the classics because my dad was so big on the classics, but it also was in a very easy to read way. So I'd read these. I remember what was it? The Secret Garden. The Secret Garden was one of my favorite ones. I remember just peak girly time listening and reading that. The American Girl doll books, huge fan. Obviously Diary of a Wimpy Kid, any of the diary books. What was the other one? Junie B. Jones was huge for me. I loved the Magic Treehouse books. I was so inspired by those, especially because I had a wild imagination and I was convinced that all of a sudden my life was just going to become Narnia and I was going to have this cool little universe that I would explore. I know that there are girls though who read more, so tell me what your favorite books were as kids. What were you reading? What were your faves? Because I know that I'm not even scratching the surface of books that people were reading. What else were we doing? We had posters all over our walls from our J14 magazines. Cosmos or the Astro Girl magazines. I remember loving the American Girl catalogs and the American Girl magazine. It was so good. And reading about other girls and what they were doing, they would have no, it wasn't this one. It was the girls magazine. I think it was Girls World. And they'd have a featured girl or featured girls and their ages and what they liked doing. And they would get their perspectives. It was so cool. Oh my God, it was such a cool magazine. And I loved this magazine. And just sitting down and reading about all these girls and thinking that maybe one day I could be in this magazine, right? I also remember having my stuffed animals and feeling bad for them because I didn't give them enough attention. So I would make sure to spend time with each of them. And the ones that were in your room or even on your bed, those were the peak stuffed animals. And I remember feeling a little bit bad for the other ones, right? Because they weren't getting the attention that my favorites were getting, but we all had our favorites. We were playing favorites with our stuffed animals. And I remember giving them personalities and confiding in them sometimes. If I wasn't playing with my American Girl dolls for a long time, I would sit down and I would make sure to pay attention to each one or brush their hair. Brushing Barbie hair and redressing the Barbies by yourself because you didn't have your sister to play with. Maybe you didn't really want to play with Barbies, you just kind of wanted to fuck with them for a little bit. Loved that. I also remember confiding in my pets. This is not really niche to being alone, but you were alone. I mean, you were with your pet, right? I would sit down and I would talk to my dog. I would tell her everything that was happening to me. And as if my dog knew what the hell I was saying, which you know what? I don't speak dog. Maybe she did. Maybe she was. And I remember crying and thinking oh, she knows me or she can speak human. I cannot be the only one, right? Does anyone else have that experience where you're looking at your pet and you're now would be the time. Now would be the time for you to speak human to me. I'm having a mental breakdown. I got an F in math class and I need you to tell me that it'll be okay. Okay? I remember sitting outside and I know I'm not the only one, but this is gonna be niche again. I would sit outside and I would literally tell the universe, I'd pray out loud. I'd be hey, can the animals come to me now? Can I have a squirrel talk to me and sing to me? I would love that. It would really make my day. I remember hoping for that, right? And imagining it happening. And I remember there was one time where a bird flew right by the branch that I was sitting at. And I was yep, I have magic. Narnia, let's go. Okay. I know this isn't specific to me. This is a lot of girls. That's why I made this podcast. So tell me, is this crazy? Am I crazy? Was I just a weird kid? Or were we all weird kids? What else were we doing? This one was huge for the girls. We would sit down and rearrange our rooms like it was an Olympic sport. Our rooms were but a canvas to our what idea we had if we watched a makeover show. I think there was a makeover show that was on, I don't know if it was Discovery Kids or something, where people would come and help decorate their rooms or whatever. I remember Home Extreme Makeover really inspired me and I loved the episodes where they had a lot of kids because that meant a lot of rooms for me to imagine me being cool enough to be on Home Extreme Makeover. Even though now looking back, again, that show was flawed and that there was some lore with that. We had so much fun doing all of this stuff as kids. There was nobody stronger than a 7-year-old who wanted a new room rearrangement. I remember getting my sister, because we always knew that we'd get in trouble if we fucked with our room too much. So I remember getting my sister before I would get anyone else, having her help me rearrange my room or my bed. I remember trying to disassemble the bunk bed ones to get them to be 2 beds in this room actually. And I remember it didn't work. There was not enough room and being really disappointed disappointed because I really wanted that like classic too bad situation because I felt like I was too old for the whole bunk bed thing. I think this was when I was like 13, right? So much fun. You'd rearrange all your trinkets. You'd go through all your stuff. I remember saving like my notebooks and my journals that I still have, by the way. That's a whole other podcast episode. I would sit there and I would re-go through all of these things. I'd reread all my letters or my journal entries and I'd feel so embarrassed. Or I'd be like, actually, that was really good and I should be an author. I remember going through my like sentimental bin or creating a sentimental bin, thinking that I would want this stuff. And a lot of it I did, but there was maybe one bin where I was like, why did I keep that? I would collect rocks and clean them, and I would clean them so much that I would sort them and figure out what my favorites were and put them in my jewelry box because I think we all put our collected rocks in jewelry boxes. And I remember like giving them a seasonal deep clean, right? We'd wash them, make sure that they're good, look at them all, show our friends, trade them. Except I was very, very picky, and the ones I kept, I would keep. I loved a rock. I remember going outside by myself actually and digging for fossils or treasure. Did anybody dig for treasure? Because I thought and was convinced that if I just dug more, I'd find a treasure chest. And I would do this with my sisters, but I would also do this by myself, admittedly. Again, unhinged girl things, right? Let's talk about the emotional processing that was being alone in your room or being alone by yourself as a little girl. Crying and just letting out every single ounce of feeling that you were having in that moment was so therapeutic. The emotional processing that we were able to do with our own selves, and I know I kind of touched on this at the beginning of this episode, but I want to kind of dive in a little bit more. Crying alone, and not just crying alone, but like sobbing by yourself when you're a young girl about something. Maybe you're in your room because you got in trouble and you're sobbing because that was very early 2000s core, and I think even like earlier than that, you'd be sent to your room. Most of us, we loved it deep down, but I remember being so just tuned in with my feelings and just sobbing, feeling so sorry for myself, or sobbing because of something at school, or sobbing because of a social issue I was experiencing, sobbing because I felt like my parents didn't understand me, right? Sobbing because I thought maybe I was secretly adopted. Oh my God. And you would just process it and get sad about it and then bawl again and then feel better and then bawl again. Or maybe this was just me, but it was so healing to do this. And I think that this is such a healthy practice to just let yourself be sad and just bawl your eyes out for a while. I know that when I was going through my divorce, this was a huge coping mechanism for me, was just bawling about everything that I was experiencing, all the grief, the layers and layers and layers of grief that you experience when you're getting a divorce, even if you know that that partner is not for you, or they did this thing that you can never come back from, or you guys just grew apart. It is still so sad to get divorced. And I really tapped in with that like letting myself cry mentality that I did as a little girl, because I think to be a woman is to feel your feelings deeply. Women feel in ways I don't think men will ever comprehend. They call us too emotional, but it's not that we're too emotional, it's that we let ourselves feel feelings. And not only do we let ourselves feel feelings, but we try to give ourselves permission to do so. And I know we live in a world where men are not always given that permission, and I think we should change that, obviously. But that is peak girlhood, is bawling your eyes out by yourself. And I also remember replaying social situations in my head and trying to navigate if I could have done something better or how I would be if I was popular. Just really letting myself feel and thinking about it and processing it and learning about myself. And I feel like I took time to learn about myself way more when I was young, which in a lot of ways makes sense because when you're young, you know, you're coming of age, you're learning, you're growing, you're constantly evolving, your brain is developing at rates that you can't even catch up with. So it makes sense, and it is only natural that you are going to do more reflecting when you're a kid. And maybe some kids aren't doing reflecting. Maybe that's just like some girls will do that and some girls won't. And I think that's part of the process of being a girl, is that sometimes you're going to do that, sometimes you're not. And if you were a girl who didn't cry at night, I want to know what you did instead. Were you sad? Was that just like childhood depression, or was that just being a kid? I don't know. I want to know. If you are a mental health or child psychologist watching this, which if there are, oh my gosh, what but I'd die to have like one of you on here. Could you help me understand that a little bit? What it is about girls and just replaying those social situations and letting ourselves feel in that reflective time when we're young. Is that a thing, right? Like our journal time, our drawing time, that pure creativity that you would feel as a little kid that I miss so much and that I've been really diving into as an adult. And I think while writing this podcast episode, I just was so glad that I was writing this because I feel like as women, we need to make space for alone time, and alone time that isn't just distracting, that isn't just numbing ourselves. I'm talking alone time with not having anything to hinder ourselves, without any distractions, just giving ourselves the space to be in our feminine energy. And that is something that I'm hoping this podcast will do for women, is to allow yourselves to be in your feminine energy and to take notes from childhood you, or to remember those times when you were a kid and to learn from younger you, because I do think there's this intuitive, deep, intellectual side to our younger selves where we're so in tune with our needs and our emotions in a way that I think was healthy, in a way that I think we could get and use it now as adults. So my closing statement is, we miss this not because we miss our childhoods, but because we were free from societal pressure and distractions. We miss just being girls. We miss being in our feminine energy. We're watching people do things, but we're not doing it ourselves. So now maybe our self-love is giving that to ourselves, is rebuilding the woman that we are and ever evolving to be. Because I think to be human is to consistently and constantly evolve and change and grow and reflect and heal and create. To be human is to create, and to be human is to make art. Whether it's awful art or beautiful art or mediocre art, to be human is to be in touch with that again, is to experience life again. And when you were alone as a child, that's precisely what you were doing. Anyways, I hope you guys liked this podcast episode. Please dive in the comments below. YouTube, I love you. Comment down below. I want to hear more from you. Spotify, I know you're really good at commenting. I know there's a few of you who have been consistently interacting with my stuff, and I love that. And I'm so happy that this podcast has been touching other women and giving us a place to be girls. You know what I mean? Like, this is finally a place where we're able to be in our feminine and reflect and love and find pleasure in that. So anyways, if you guys want to stand behind that, give this podcast a rating, subscribe, do all the things, like, comment, share, spread this around, share this with your friends, because this is a place for us. Whether you're the most feminine girly girl ever, or you identify with they them, or you identify with being more masculine, or you identify with being kind of in the middle, wherever you land, this is where you get to thrive. Anyways, I will see you guys next week.